Hello, I'm Jerry Engelhardt, and today's date is August 25th of 2015, and we're here in the home of Shirley Bauer, and we're going to visit with Shirley about some of her family history and the local history and about her herself. So Shirley, you were married to Paul, and I'm sure you lived in other farms before this one.
Just one.
Just this?
After I was married,
after
we were married, we lived down the road a quarter of a mile. That's where Paul was born.
Okay,
Yeah,
I think you told me
yeah,
that.
it was the Schultz. Well, it's the Schultz. Was the Schultz farm, and of course the Schultzes were the girls of the Schultz family were Mrs. Grimm and Mrs. Kaminke and Mrs. Gildy, and there was a boy in the family by the name of Louis Schultz. He never married, but all the girls lived around here, lived all their lives around here. But they were all Schultzes.
There's a American Legion post or something named Louis Schultz post, but that wouldn't be named after him.
I don't know, I don't think so, but I just heard, Donna Tillman just told me that she always thought the school out east of town was the Cox School. That's where she went to school. But she says, you know, that really was the Schultz School. And I do know that this fella, his name, well, I forget, I always thought he was Louis Schultz because the obituary named him as Louis Schultz, but that was his son's name. His name was, I can't remember, it was Edward. But anyhow, the kids were all born south, all of his children, I should say, were born east of Earlville. So it's possible that that school, if it was called the Schultz School, it could have been named because that's where they lived. But that isn't really southeast of Earlville. But I never did ask Donna where she found that out, unless maybe it was in that school book.
To find that out.
Yeah, right.
About when did you move here? Do you remember?
Yes. Well, I was married in 47, and we lived on the Schultz farm for 15 years, and then I moved here in 62.
Oh, okay. Very
1962.
Good. And this farm, I think you said you had all kinds of livestock and things going on here at one time?
Well, yes, you know, every farmer had pigs, hogs. I don't know. We were probably average. I don't know whether we farrowed 10 pigs, sows twice a year, probably there, and we milked cows, probably half a dozen or so. And we never sold milk. We never had a milkman. We always separated the milk. And we all separated the milk and sold the cream if we had any left after the household use. But but then eventually, when we moved here, we got into feeding cattle.
Well, you had an egg operation too, didn't you?
Oh yes.
Was that a strong kind
Yes,
of
it
thing?
was. Yes, we started out with 6,000, and that was in '62. We built that the same year we moved here, and then we increased it to, we extended that house to 11,000, and then in '70 we added on another 11, so we had 22,000 laying hens. Gathered about 18,000 eggs a day.
They didn't have bird flu in those days, did they?
Well, no. Yeah,
it's serious now.
Yes, it is. The egg prices are really
Now,
good.
is that something that was good for you folks, or would you?
Well, yes. See, the way strong he was doing this, there's a lot of houses that were only 3,000. But Strong's furnished the pullets, and they furnished the feed, and you furnished the house and the labor. Well, after, I don't know how many years, 10 years or 12 years, Strong's were, they weren't making money like they should. Because, the egg business is kind of like any other business. Yeah. You make a bundle one year, and then maybe the next year you don't. You make a little, and then you lose some the next year, and then when the prices are good, everybody expands, and then the prices go down. And so anyhow, Strong's got out of it, and we went on our own for several years. And the best part of it was the year that I started running the mail route, got the job in the mail route, we decided we were going to do away with the chicken houses. And so
I
One,
bet your kids were all involved in that.
well,
too,
they
weren't
were, yeah, but they were all gone by that time. Yeah, I have 4 boys.
Should have
and
spread
they
them out
all-
more.
The 4 boys, they were a big help, yeah, they were pretty good at, they each had their row together or something, you know. But anyhow, when we were going out of the business, why, we decided, well, that one house, we, instead of, we were going to mold it. Well, we had never molded a house before, you know. And so we decided to mold it because it was going to cost us $27,000 to put pullets in, you know. And so we molded them, and at the time the prices were right. Well, we were getting $1.70, you know. Usually eggs are what, 60 cents a dozen, or so, but we were getting $1.70 or so when both of our houses were in full production with big eggs. And so the last year we were in business, the last 2 years
Did you grind your own feed and everything?
Oh no, we bought it. When Strong's went out of the business, why we got our stuff from Princeton. I can't remember the name of the elevator in Princeton, but that's where we got it. So.
Well, we're looking for stories here today, and I think I know the story now. I talked to you about it, but how did Paul find you?
Well, at the roller skating rink. It's just like all my brother and my sister and my 2 girlfriends, everybody. Well, back in those days, in the 40s, everybody found their mate at the skating rink in San
Or nearby.
But the skating rink was a big thing in those days.
I can't tell you how many people have told me that same story. That they went to the skating rink and through trial and error they ended up with their wife.
Yeah, right. Well, you know, the skating rink started when I was 13, 14 years old. Tommy Fairclough came in with, and he put up the floor and put up a tent, okay? Well, then it was quite successful, so he built a building. And, of course, Tommy, nobody could compare with Tommy playing. He played by ear. He played the organ by ear, but, boy, he had wonderful, you know, you could skate, you know, skate to his music.
A friend of mine still says he was the best.
Oh yeah, he was. But anyhow, then it burnt down, and he put up another one. But the big story is, you know, they had sides on it that would open up on the skating rink, and that was a lot of the people's entertainment on nights to go out there and sit in their car and watch the
How many nights a week
skate.
was that open?
I think it was open all the time. I really do. I think it was open every night.
I remember going by there and hearing the organ music, but
I believe it was open every night. Well, of course, I usually went maybe on Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday nights. Of course, I didn't even live a mile from it, you know.
I bet you were a good skater.
Well, I was. I wasn't.
Could you skate backwards or
Oh
on the
yeah, yes, I could skate backwards, but I wasn't one of those daredevils that went like 100
there were
miles
show-offs
an hour.
there too,
right,
I hear.
Yeah, right. But it was fun. Of course, Paul came over. He used to come over. Pinky Heckathorn. Well, Pinky's name was really Chester, but his grandfather, not his grandfather, but his uncle had the same name, so we always called him Pinky. And then there was another one, George Washington Smith. He came from, and Bob Locke. They used to come over all together, you know, to the skating rink. Yeah, so.
Well, tell us a little bit about your family, because you weren't always a Bauer.
No, I was not. I was a Frisch. F-R-I-T-S-C-H. And I was born in the house on my parents' farm on Sandy Bluff Road between Sandwich and Plano.
And what was your parents' name?
Well, I was born on March 23rd, 1924. My parents were George A. Frisch, and my mother was Ruth Otto Frisch. And so my grandpa, Frisch, came over from Germany in 1866 or 7. He was about 25. He was born in 41, so he came over about in 66 or so. And of course, he settled in Sheboygan, Wisconsin, because I think he had a cousin or something there. But there was no work there for him except they were being a woodsman to clearing fields. So he went to Chicago because he had been trained as a butcher in Germany. and he was going to set up his own butcher shop, but he couldn't get the capital to start, so he went and worked at the Union Stockyards in Chicago. And of course, you know, in those days, the farmers used to go in with their livestock to see their livestock sold, and this fellow by the name of Rogers from south of Sandwich came and was looking for a hired man. So my grandpa, oh yeah, I like that job. So he came out and worked for Rogers until he got married, and then he farmed, and then he went farming for himself on a Stewart farm, which would be, is that Oak Ridge? I think it's Grizzle Springs Road. You know Grizzle Springs Road?
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Okay, I think there's a road that shoots off to the south. I think it's Oak Ridge.
Oaks, yeah.
Yeah,
Oaks
and it
something.
was, well, as I know it, it was after Stewart's had it, I know it was a Denman farm. But anyhow, he farmed that farm for 22 years, and then he bought, in 1893, he bought the Frisch homestead where I was raised. He bought that. There was 250 acres there.
And that's the one just south of 34?
Yes, well, it's south and north.
Just north of
Creek,
Sandy
Little
Bluff.
Rock, yes, right. A Little Rock Creek runs right through the middle of it, and we have a drainage ditch on the south side, and that drainage ditch was dug by hand back early. They wanted to drain the Sandwich Lake. There was a lake on the west side of Sandwich.
That's how they did them, man.
Yeah, and of course, the people used to enjoy it, but then it started to shrink, and it was getting marshy and causing a lot of mosquitoes. So they dug a ditch from, I suppose that's about 2 miles, out to, and it ran along the south farm of my folks' farm, and it meets the Little Rock Creek right at the edge of our farm. And so, actually, so the creek actually cuts our farm in two one way, and the railroad and 23 cut it in the other way.
Oh, did it?
Yeah, right.
So you had some land north of the
Oh yeah, we
Earlville.
have most of the land, most of the farmland is north of the,
Oh, okay, I didn't know that.
yeah, right, the highway. But anyhow, so that's how my grandpa acquired that land. And my grandma, she actually was born here up by Sheboygan. Her father came over in 1853. He came over with his brother. My grandpa's name was Wilhelm, but when they hit, I think when they get to America, it's William. And then and he came over with his brother Frederick and two sisters, and they came over on the ocean. Well, I think the name of the ship was the Ocean Liner, and they were listed as farmers, and the two women were listed as men servants. Mm-hmm. But anyhow, and they settled up by Sheboygan, and my grandfather's name was okay.
Hard to pronounce?
No, it isn't. But I know it, but I'm thinking about it. Anyhow, he got married, obviously, because my grandmother was born in 1861, and that was the year that he joined the Union Army and fought in the Civil War. But he was only in a couple of years because he got TB, and they sent him home. But his brother, he joined with him, and he stayed in until 65, and he was in the Battle of Bull Run and some other ones, and he was injured, but he evidently recovered from it. And after he was discharged in 65, he maybe a year or two after, he signed up again and went in for a couple more years. But what's so interesting, when he was released the second time, he got $442.65 for clothes and bounty, they called it, when he got out of the service. Yeah, right. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, it's quite a bit of money.
Yeah, right, yeah, but back in those days, yeah. And
well, yes.
yes, William Heiss, and he married Sophia, whatever, Ullman or something like that, and she was born in Prussia. And, so I was curious why everybody else was German, but she was born in Prussia. Well, I looked up Prussia, and Prussia actually was like a kingdom inside of Germany that covered about 2/3 of the German territory. And when Hitler came in, he did away with Prussia and made it all Germany. What he did with the king, I don't know. But they claimed it was a kingdom at one time.
Yeah.
Well, anyhow, she came over from there. We don't know too much about her, but we do know that her father was killed over there in Germany by a rock, and they never did find the perpetrator, but a neighbor on his deathbed admitted that he had killed him for his money. So I suppose that's how come my grandma, she lost her father's, my great-grandma, how come she came over here. And then she married William Heiss, and they had 6 children, and my grandma was one of them. And she was born, I said, in 1861. And they were very, and then William, her husband, died at 42, and he left her with these six small children.
That happened
yes,
a lot.
right. And two of them were boys, and they were twins. And the one moved to Utah, and he was telling his family about how they had nothing. He said, we were really destitute. We had nothing. And his mother remarried then, which was probably so she'd have a home for her children and a place for something for them to eat, because that marriage ended in divorce. So that was the story.
Tough times.
Yes, right.
People think they have a tough time.
Yeah, right.
So,
because you didn't have the government to help you out then.
well, if that segment is over, why don't we switch to your marriage to Paul, and we'll talk a little bit about the Bauers. But you had 4 sons, and
yes, right.
I know their names, but I want you to...
Yeah, well, I had Ray, Bruce, John, and Michael.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And Paul lived down the road from where we're at here.
Yes, Paul was born on the Schultz farm. His parents moved there in 1921, and Oscar, his brother, was born there 4 days after they moved on the place, and then the next year Paul was born. But they had two older sisters,
okay.
Louise and Rose, and they were quite a bit older. Louise was probably 13 years older than Paul, and Rose was probably 10 years older than Paul. But yeah, they moved there. And
Oscar's still alive, isn't he?
no, Oscar died at 40. He was in his 50-something. He had a leaking valve in his heart, and he wouldn't have surgery on it. So.
Well, what's the other Bauer in town?
Robert Bauer is Oscar's son.
Okay.
Yes, Oscar had 4 children: Richard, Robert, Roland, and Becky.
Well, who's the lady that did taxes in town? Member of the Lutheran Church.
No, you got me there.
She did articles too. Well, that's too far removed from you there, I guess.
Yeah, but anyhow, Paul. So all he ever knew was this territory. He was born down the road, and he moved a quarter of a mile down the road and lived there all his life, right here.
I probably knew Ray the best. He was the oldest and great athlete, interesting guy. I'm sure he helped out with the work here on the farm too.
Oh yes, he did.
And then there's Dr. Bruce, isn't it?
Yeah, he's a doctor now. Well, a doctor of, not a true doctor. I mean,
yeah, not medical.
Not a medical doctor, but.
And he was
superintendent.
Superintendent of LaSalle, Peru.
Well, he was principal in LaSalle, Peru, but he was superintendent of Indian Creek for 10 years. I think he was superintendent up at Shabana, and then of course John. He was a golfer. Well, all my okay. Ray, Bruce, and John were all very good athletes. They were all little 10.
Earlville Athletics lived on their backs.
Well, yeah. Well, they were quarterbacks for 6 years. Ray wouldn't go out for football because he loved basketball, so he wouldn't go out for football because he's afraid to get hurt. Well, the last year, Coach Weinberner talked him into going out his senior year to be quarterback. So he did. He went out, and then 2 years after, then the next 2 years, Bruce was quarterback, and then John, he started when he was a sophomore being quarterback for the football team. And of course, Bruce, but the funny part of it is, of course, Ray always, baseball was his favorite. I mean, outside of basketball. When he was a kid, 6 years old, he used to go out here and stand in the road and pick up a stick and hit stones. Of course, we had a gravel road at that time. And he'd do that continuously. And when he got a little older, he would want he and Bruce would get in a fight because he'd want Bruce to go out and play ball with him, and Bruce wouldn't go out. But Bruce, he liked football the best, and of course he went down to Illinois State on a football scholarship, but he liked foot. And then John, he was good in all sports too. But then he took up Francis Shabsley talked him into going out for golf rather than track. In high school.
This is John now.
This is John, yeah. And so he liked golf, and he said why he liked it because it was individual sports. You made or died by what you yourself did. And about John too. One time, they played over in Mendota in baseball. I don't know whether it was Babe Ruth, or I don't think it was the Legion, but John won a golf tournament on Saturday, and the next day he pitched for Mendota, and he pitched a no-hitter. Yeah, right.
I have memories too of your boys there, and Ray, I remember it was a triple overtime basketball game with Pawpaw.
Yeah.
They were good too that year.
Yeah, right.
And Ray got the ball with like 20 seconds left, third overtime, and he went up at the halfway mark, or the mid-court, and jumped and shot, and nobody thought he'd do that early, and it swished, and it just...
Well, Pawpaw was supposed to win that year.
Yeah, they were good.
Yeah, so Earlville, though, they didn't win. Serena beat them then the next game. But Ray was that type of player, though. He liked pressure. A lot of people, they came under pressure. But the more pressure Ray, he seemed to, he liked it. Well, he was still, after he was 43 when he died, he had this, I don't know what, his little blood clots going through his heart, and they were going to put a shunt-in or something to keep it, and he died on the operating table. But anyhow, he was still playing baseball, and in fact, he was picked as the most valuable player on his team at 42 or 43. Yeah.
Bruce was steady too at basketball, and he was a great football player.
Yeah, right.
And baseball too.
Right.
But I remember as a sophomore, he was playing on Coach Tufte's team. And it was a big game. I don't know if Serena or who it was, but they put him in. First time I'd seen him, I think it was a Little 10 tournament game, come to think about it. It might have been a Plano. And he sunk 5 straight shots without missing. And, of course, won the game right there. That was it.
Yeah.
As a sophomore. And he hadn't grown his full height yet.
Yeah, right.
He was just kind of a young farm kid. They threw in there and he won the game.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, they were all good. Well, and of course now my youngest Mike, he went out for sports, but he wasn't like his others. But he was. He is the one that can do everything, and he likes to shop. I mean, not shop, but ag, because they take a tractor apart and put it back together, and this and that. And he, how he was. He won a bicycle when he was 10, 11 years old at the Lions Day play
day.
Yeah, the fun days they had. And in 2 weeks, I went out there. Here he had it all apart. He was he had taken another bicycle and he was mixing the two of them together. And that's the way he was. He always was doing something mechanically with his hands. And
your son John, who was a terrific athlete, plus a great golfer, which is athletics too, he moved to Florida, and he had a daughter named Beth. And tell us about Beth.
Yeah, well, Beth, of course, John was, he was a pro at a golf course down there. More than one, but I mean more than one golf course. But anyhow, his daughter, from the time she was 3 or 4 years old, naturally he had a golf club in her hand, and she eventually played in junior golf, and then she went on to play in what is
The
golf?
pros?
Yeah, the pros.
Shoot, pro
And
golf,
yeah, and then the first year she was in the pros, she was player of the year. Yeah, she was player of the year, and she played pro for about 5-6 years. But now I think the pressure got to her. That's why she really quit. I think because, and of course, well, okay, so she lost her dad when she was only 14 years old, and he was her coach, you know.
And he died of a
Yeah,
rare...
yeah, Bill, I pronounce it Guillain-Barré, but I don't know how medical people call it. But if you look on, when you take a flu shot, they say if you ever had this, you don't take this. But it's something that kind of paralyzes your muscles, I think, more or less, and it affected his inner organs. And I can remember when I was down there, and when he was in the hospital, he threw up his hand one time. And the finger just flew back like that, like there was nothing. That's how, and you know, it's a lot of people, most people don't die from it, but it does leave them handicapped in some ways. But
Yeah, it's hard to
but
believe.
he did.
Wow.
He did. He was only 41, but of course, she went on. I give her mother credit. She kept her going into golf.
Best mother, you mean?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
She kept her going into golf, and eventually she made the
Pros.
pros. Yeah, right. So.
Did she ever play for a college, or just...
Oh yes, yes. She went to Duke for 2 years. Yes. She was. Yeah, she got a full scholarship.
That's a great golf school.
She got a very full scholarship to Duke,
Oh.
and she went 2 years, and then she decided to turn pro. So yeah, and their school won the national championship the year she was there, the last year she was there.
Well, tell us a little bit about the Bauers and how they got here, and any stories or people you remember from the Bauer family.
Yes. Well, the first Bauer to come to United States was Paul's father, Alphonse Bauer, in 1903. He came over, and I think they said he had $20 in his pocket when he came or something. I don't know. But anyhow, he came over, and he was scheduled to go to Sandwich, but he ended up in Earlville and working for John Gast, who was the father of Herb and Clarence Gast, and their descendants, Harold and Howard, and that are his great grand. But anyhow, and that the gas place is right straight south of here, a mile.
Oh.
But there you have to go just 2 or 3 miles to get there. But it's right straight south of here. But anyhow, he worked there, and then Paul's mother, she came over in 1908, and she came over with Alphonse Bauer's brother, Egede Bauer. They both came on the same ship.
I remember that name, Egede. You don't forget that name.
Yeah, they came over together, and supposedly, I think her sister was the one who was supposed to come over, maybe to marry Alphonse, but she says, I'm not going over there to get scalped by the Indians, and so Josephine, Paul's mother, she was more than glad to get out of there because she didn't get along with her stepmother, I guess. So she came over, and she worked, when she first got over here to pay, she worked at the house. There's no house there anymore, but Dodge Park, where Dodge Park is, there was a house, and she worked for the towns. And I think probably, I don't know whether it's related to the towns, but anyhow, she worked for people by the name of Town. And she said to pay her back, her father back for her passage over here. And and then the next year, she and Alphonse were married, and they moved. They went to Iowa, and they lived in a sod house. I suppose he worked as a hired man out there. And Louise, their first daughter, was born in a sod house out in Iowa. Then they moved to Minnesota, and their second daughter, Rose, was born in Minnesota. And after 10 years, they came back to Illinois, and started in 1919. And they started farming up on, they always called it Pigeon Hill. Pigeon Hill.
Up by Aurora?
No, Pigeon Hill. It's where John Cafote
Okay.
George Cafode lived there, and John Cafode, and it's still in the Cafode family. But at that time, I don't know who owned it, and but they called it Pigeon Hill. And I suppose the reason for that was because you know how the pigeons always roost in barns or cribs and that. They don't roost in trees. And it was in a high spot. It's on a high spot, and evidently they like to go there and roost. So I suppose that's how they call it Pigeon Hill. But the story, this is a funny story too, you know. But my boys used to sell pigeons. They'd go out and catch them at night, and because the Rod and Gun clubs were giving them 75 cents a pigeon or something. You know, the Rod and Gun clubs used to actually let loose a pigeon and for them to shoot at in their shoot meets. And of course, I never thought about it this way, but you know, now they use clay pigeons, and that's how they got the name of clay pigeons, because they use pigeons, and now they're using
never
clay
thought about
pigeons.
that.
But my boys used to, they would go out and catch the pigeons and sell them because this guy would come around. But anyhow, they lived there until they moved down in 21. They moved on the Schultz farm, and they lived there the rest of their life. Alphonse died in 46, the year before Paul and I were married, and the mother, we lived with, I lived with her. We lived together for 2 or 3 years until she bought a house in town, and then she died. But Grandma Bauer was a very ambitious person. When she was living with us, Charlie Heckathorn, his wife died, and he had 2 adopted children, and Armin and Betty. And of course his wife died, and so Grandma went over and would go over and during the day and see the kids off to school and feed them, and then she'd come home. And she also, later on, she worked for the Whitakers. He lost his wife. He lived south of town with the, okay.
Not Frank.
No, not Frank. He would be, Kenny Stockley's mother, Kenny Stockley's mother's father, who it really was. Okay. And she also worked for the Torman in town. She worked for Strong's. She used to do housework for them. She worked for Bill Babcock and cleaned his office when he had an insurance business. And she also helped, she cleaned at Marathon. So you can see she was a busy person. But she was known for her Coogan. She used to make this cherry Coogan and apple Coogan, and everybody in town would get a piece of it at some time or other. She was known around Earlville for her peach Coogan.
So what is, I've never heard that, Coogan, what is that, like a powder?
Yes, it's kind of like that. It's kind of like a coffee cake, you know. Okay. It's the dough, and then you put cherry, and then you put cream that would soak in.
Sounds good.
Yeah, right.
So, how about the neighborhood around here? Who's lived around you, been your close neighbors the last 40 years or so?
Well, of course, before, we did have a kind of a historical thing, right?
Yeah, right, something right I didn't know about, but I sure do now.
Yeah, right across. Well, see, this man, do I mention the man's name?
Yeah, I think.
Gustav Gildy. He lived right north of me. I've got the 80 acres here, and the Gildys own the 80 acres right north of me. And the house actually was right across from the Bauer farm too. But anyhow, this Gussie Gildy, supposedly he was kind of flirting with the neighbor's wife, and then the neighbor shot him. And
he ran out for the driveway and shot him there, didn't he?
Well, supposedly his wife was down by the mailbox, and Mr. Gildy was in the cornfield right across from the mailbox or something. But anyhow, he shot him, but of course he took his wife and they went into town and he turned himself right in. Well, this man, his name was Moore, was it Moore? But anyhow, he used to be a hired man. He worked for Frank Atherton, and one summer he went back to where he came from. He came back and brought this lady with him and said it was his wife. And so he lived with the Athertons, and then I don't know whether he was still working for the Athertons when he lived at this house right north of me here now. But anyhow, that's where he lived when he shot this man. And of course, he went in town and turned himself in. And I don't know whether it's a constable or what they had in those days, but they came out and they found that Mr. Gildy had started to walk home and he died along the road. Well, anyhow, so he was put in, this man who shot him by the name of Moore, he was put in jail, but I had my grandson, of course I cannot see, look things up. My grandson was looking it up, and he said, the neighbors went and bailed him out. He says, why would the neighbors bail a man out who shot their neighbor? And I said, well, they must have thought a lot of him, or whatever. And so, but anyhow, he was, and then they had a coroner's jury, and he was sent to Ottawa and put in jail in Ottawa. Well, he was down there, and they raised the bail down there, so he sat in jail. Well, he sat in jail for a year and a half almost down there. Every time his trial was supposed to come up, they'd postpone it for 3 months, and then next 3 months, and it was...
Things haven't changed much.
It was, yeah, right. Yeah, right, true. But he was, anyhow, this happened in August of 23, and in November of 24, they just turned him loose. He never did have a trial. And I guess he and his, they found out that actually he wasn't married. He got married then after he got in jail.
Oh, he did?
He actually wasn't married to this lady. But anyhow, after they got out of jail, they said that they got on a train and left, and nobody seen them after that. But yeah, it took them that long, almost a year and a half, before they just turned him loose. They didn't even have a trial for him. But anyhow, across the road from the Schultz place was the Lynn farm, and that was owned by Florence and her father. Roscoe Lynn, maybe you've heard of Roscoe.
Oh, yeah.
Lynn. He was a big shot in the bank.
Lived down by the grade school.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right. But anyhow, they were kind of hard people to get along with, because I can name probably 10 different families that lived there. So nobody ever lived. Kenny Wolf lived across from us at one time, and Eugene Keller lived across the road from us, and Bob Rose lived across from us.
Oh, really?
And I'm trying to think.
Down the road there is Jerry Gollner?
Oh, Jerry Gollner, the tree man. Yeah, well, he's the other way. He lives down the road here. He's, we have Jerry Gollner. Of course, Bill Widener, he was the brother-in-law of this Gussie Gildy. He lived right down the road here, too. And this was his farm right down here.
We should point out for anybody that's watching this that the Gussie Gildy that we're talking about is not the most recent Gussie Gildy.
No, Gussie Gildy,
Yeah,
his son was
father, wasn't it?
That's right.
Yeah.
And Gussie, the one that we all know and belonged to the Legion and was a good guy, he was only 8 years old when his father was killed, and he was raised by, I believe he was raised by a family by the name of Wells that lived right down the road here on 34. And he was raised, and there's,
I think he's with the Heckethorn some. I don't know how much.
Well, Heckethorn, he would have worked for Charlie Heckethorn, but that was after he was older, because Charlie Heckethorn's wife was his sister. See, his sister, Elsie, that married Charlie Heckethorn, she was like 16 years old when this happened. And I don't know what happened to her. She probably stayed in the house. But her two younger sisters were raised by Lawrence Gildy's father, Emo Gildy, that family, and by Emma Dolder. So Emma Dolder must have been related too. But those two girls were raised by those people.
Yeah, that's kind of a sad story there, but
yeah, it
I
is.
guess
Yeah.
turned out good for everybody.
Well, they all turned out well. They all married well. Gussie came back, and as I remember, I don't know, he lived on the farm then. After he was in the service, and I
Gussie
think,
Jr., yeah.
Gussie Jr., yeah. He lived here until he died on this farm. right north of me. But he did work, somebody said he did work for Charlie Eckathorn, I suppose as a teenager, because his sister was married to Charlie.
And that's where Bob Doty lives now, right?
No, Bob Doty
No.
don't live there now. No, Bob Doty lives where this Moore, this fellow who shot,
Okay.
lived, yes. No, who lives there, well, somebody just bought it. Wagner's lived there for several years. She worked for Caterpillar, and I don't know what he did, but anyhow. But they just sold it. After Gussie died, I think these Wagners bought it, and then when they retired, they sold it. And it's just been sold in the last year. So, and of course, Freddie, the Mendes lived down the road. Freddie Mendy was, well, Gus, he was our road commissioner for quite some time too, Gussie Gildy. And then Freddie Mendy was too. Freddie lives just down the road a ways. And of course, he's still into this tractor pull. I just talked to him the other day.
Oh,
I thought he was
Mendy
out of
is?
it. Yeah, he was
I
down.
didn't know he was still in that.
Yeah, he told me. I just seen him the other day, and he told me that. I says, "Well, you aren't in that anymore." Oh, yeah, he says, because he retired from being the road commissioner several years ago. No, he's still in that tractor pulling outfit.
Then north, the next road north, there was another fellow that lived here for quite a while, wasn't there? Farm, the Menke farm?
What, Dave Eaglehart?
Right.
Okay, that's your father. Yeah, Dave. Yeah, Dave. Yeah, he lived there. That was the Menke farm. Yeah, right. And he was there. You know,
It was 600 acres, or 640, I think.
yeah, right. Well, see, I don't know whether you know though, where he actually lived was owned by Red Menke, okay? But
Right.
across the road south, that was owned by a relative. Now, I don't know what the relative was, but see, Red owned that farm, and Ray Menke owned the farm right out at west of Earlville here, where Kay Matavius lived. And then Paul, he had a farm out east of town.
Where Sellers lived.
Yeah, where Sellers lived. Yeah, so the Menkes had much land around here. Yeah, right. And but I always understood there's no buildings on the south of where your dad lived, and that was supposedly a relative of. Yeah, right. And so yeah, there's.
Did you ever have any windstorms or cyclones
Well,
or anything through here?
we had a hailstorm one time when we lived on the other farm. That's going, and we had a dust storm. Well, dust storm one time. I should tell this because your stepmother, Shirley, they were gone, and she had left her kitchen. Left her windows open. But you know. That was really very funny because of course I had dust on all my windowsills, but it got just as black as night out. It got just as black as night out. I don't know what kind of a dust. It was a dirt storm, and it got just as black as night out.
Must have been in the fall, maybe when it was dry.
Yeah, I don't know. I can't. Well, no, it wasn't, because that same day we went to. We went up. My brother, I was supposed to go to Ed, my nephew's graduation party from high school, and they didn't have it up there by Rollo, but we did, and he would have graduated in. It would have probably been in June. It would have been in June because he was born in 49, 50, and he graduated from college 22 years later. You figure that out. But it was in what year that was.
And you yourself there, you golfed, didn't you?
Oh yes,
You bowled probably?
Oh yes, I golfed and I bowled. When I was young, well, of course, I grew up in a baseball family, you know.
Yeah, your
my
dad.
My dad was a pitcher. He was, he pitched for Sandwich and other teams, because and back in those days, every hamlet or every little town had a baseball team. And of course, I always laugh. I says, and the pitcher was the only one that ever got paid. Well, maybe the umpire. But my dad, he was a pitcher, and of course my dad was Boy Frisch. We don't know where he got that that he was George, but most people never knew him as George. He was always Boy, and all his publicity was Boy in the papers and that.
B-O-Y, huh?
B-O-Y, yeah. I never thought how funny it was until I had a girl stay with me, a classmate stay with me one day, and she said, "How come your mother calls your dad Boy?" And it never sounded funny to me before that, because everybody called him Boy. And he pitched for many years, and then
He had a brother that pitched a little bit too.
no, he had brothers. They caught and they played the outfield.
Oh,
but
okay.
my brother pitched
Right.
also. Yeah, my brother also pitched for Sandwich. Well, he played in the minor leagues. Lyle did. You probably knew Lyle. I'm talking to Steve now.
Sure.
But he when he graduated from high school, we had an uncle out in Montana, and his son was sponsoring a baseball team, and they wanted him to come out there and pitch. So he went out there, and he was scouted by the Browns, and he went and played winter ball out in California, and then he played in Sioux City for a couple of years, but then he was drafted into the service. And then when he got home from the service, well, he had been in kind of he was a chief engineer. What do you call it? Mechanical on airplanes. He took care of airplanes, and he rode with the airplanes. They made him ride. If you took care of the airplanes.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. He went with the airplane.
You paid attention to what you were doing that way.
Well, yes, that's right. And they had a minor accident running off the runway, and he injured his shoulder, and it bothered him quite a bit. So but when he got back, he actually went to by that time the Cardinals had bought his contract, and he actually went to Florida and practiced with spring training with the Cardinals. And he says, and I even wore Stan Musial's old uniform, because they gave out the old uniform. He says, why I didn't keep it, I don't never know why I didn't keep it.
Money.
But then, of course, after he got back, then he did pitch for Sandwich, But it was just, on weekly, because he could stand the pain pitching one day a week. But there's some fellow.
That was from the accident.
Yeah, the plane. Yeah, he kind of hurt his shoulder, and it bothered him, But
Oh, yeah.
but anyhow, he laughs though. He says all the stories about him pitching, and they keep getting better and better all the time. But there's somebody over in Sandwich who is really digging into the old papers and finding everything on the Frisch family, and especially my dad's. And I had to laugh. We were looking at one. This was back in 1920, and the pitcher was Frisch. The catcher was Frisch, and the umpire was Frisch.
Oh, my
I
Lord.
imagine the umpire was probably my older uncle. But anyhow, you imagine three of them. They let
The other team
Frisch
probably
umpire
hollered
with the
about
catcher
that.
and the pitcher being Frisch's. But right. So.
Well, was there anything else that you thought that you'd like to bring up, as long as we're here, this is the time to do it?
Well, I'll tell you about my sport. Like I said, I grew up in a baseball family, and so we practically every night we had down in the lower yard, we called it. We played baseball all the time, and I had two uncles that used to come and play with us a lot too. Well, then of course I played on a baseball softball team with Sandwich, and I played on one with Earlville. And then.
Did you play with the Victorians?
No, I didn't play with the Victorians. That was
Okay.
before the Victorians.
Okay.
No, I didn't play with the Victorians. The Victorians came after me. But I didn't play too very long, because I did have a heart condition that acted up every once in a while, and
Hung up your spikes.
it would take off, and it would just, my heart, it would just beat terribly fast.
Mm-hmm.
It started when I was about 10 years old, but I remember I was playing baseball, and I slid into second base, and I overslid the bag. And Jim Rowe, who was insurance man in town, he was the umpire. And of course, they tagged me out, and he said, "Why didn't you get back on base? You'd have been safe." Well, he didn't know I was sitting there. My heart was beating 100 miles an hour, and I had to go sit on the bench. And after that, I thought, no, it's embarrassing. I don't know why.
I know another girl that had that.
Yeah, and it's embarrassing, so I didn't. But then when I came over to Earlville, I had bowled a little, but Paul's sister needed somebody on on the bowling team, so, and we bowled here in Earlville. So I bowled there for, I bowled 50 years consecutively in Earlville. I never missed a whole year. Even when I had the kids, I always bowled part of a year or something. And then when when I was 47, I took up golf. I quit work.
Mhm.
And I took up golf when I was 47, and I did win the Earlville Women's Championship 2 years, and 81 and 86, I think it was. And
Who were some of the other lady golfers that were notable?
well, Marilyn Gast and Linda Gast and Skip Larson, and
Did Kathy Swayze ever play?
well, Kathy was she was before my time. She'd already
Before
left.
your time, okay.
Well, I mean, she was younger than me, but I mean, she'd already left Earlville.
Okay.
I think when, yeah, she used to play, but I never knew her. I never knew her that she played. And Hazel Howie and Rita Pitstick and who else can I think of?
Familiar names in the leader.
Yeah, right. Yeah, so. Yeah.
Well, that's great.
Well, yeah, and it's a shame when I was playing golf there. Well, that was bad. Well, I mean, since we used to have 40, 45 golfers out for their ladies league, you know, and now they can't even get 20 out. It's a shame.
Yeah, well, they got to be on their cell phones.
You think so?
You might miss something.
Yeah, right. So, but I did, of course. You know, I always think when during my age, I was really kind of left out. Sandwich High School had nothing for girls. All we did was, when we were in the gym classes, we'd play each class. We'd have a tournament in March, and the classes would play each other. But that's all the competitive we ever had. And I can remember my cousin that you mentioned that drowned the year I was born. She used to play they had a basketball team, and they used to go to different towns because they talked about my uncle driving them to different towns. And when I came over here to Earlville, Gert Rowe, who was a Bolts, Gert Rowe,
right.
she talked about being a member of the Bloomer girls. They used to wear their uniforms looked like bloomers, you know, come down to the knee, and they used to travel. But what happened in the 30s? Well, I suppose the war kind of took care of that, and the depression. And we had nothing for sports when I was in school, and of course I just loved sports. I loved basketball, but
well, your boys made up for what you missed.
I guess they did. Yeah,
you
right.
probably lived through them and the games and stuff.
Yeah, right. Oh yeah.
Well, it's great to hear all these stories, and they're captured on tape now for anybody that's interested later on or now.
Yeah. Well, and of course, you have time. I can go into my mother's side of the family.
Okay, why don't you do that quickly? We've got a couple more minutes here.
The Otto. My mother was an Otto, and her father came over. Her father came over from Germany, and when he was 11 years old, and he was born in 50, so he came over in 61, and he came over with his stepmother. I mean, he came over with his mother and his stepfather and two stepbrothers, and they settled near Leland. I don't know where they settled, but my grandpa, he always lived. He went and lived with a man by the name of August Lang that lived south of Earlville, and my grandpa's name was August also. And so when he was 11 years old, he was old enough to work. So he went and this man owned quite a bit of land, and he and his wife did not have any children, and so they took in people like that, and I imagine. But they were very good. I mean, I never ever heard anybody say they didn't treat my grandpa right. I mean, they made him work hard. And of course, he was good to him, because when my grandpa bought the Otto farm, which was
the one in Sandwich?
The one in Sandwich in 1890. Mr. Lang signed the note for him, you know. So he was always in good terms. And my grandma also.
So is that how August Otto got his first name, is being named after Mr. Lang?
No. He was August when he came over. August, everybody's August. August or George or something that come over from the old country. I'll tell you, you know, here it was George the Binders that own this farm is George and Frederick and I don't know, but anyhow. But no, his name was George when he came over. And I mean, his name was August when he came over. Hey, I'm getting myself mixed up here. But anyhow, he married, my grandma came over from Germany also, but she settled in Iowa. She came over with relatives, and she settled in Iowa, and I suppose because they're from the relatively the same neck of the woods over in Germany, they got together and they got married, and they had 10 children. Between them, the Ottos. And Augie, the most famous of all of them, is my cousin Augie Otto. He built the train that they have at the fairgrounds. That was the second train he built. The first one was a mini scale, but everything was by proportion. I mean, what do you call it?
He milled and
he did
drilled and everything.
Right. Yeah, and they had the smaller rail train at the fair for a few years, but then he built this bigger one that they have now. And and his family still runs the train there at the fairgrounds. He had 2 sons, Norman and Ellen, and then he had a daughter Carol. She married a Swenson. And
he also built one of the first gravel sifters around here too.
Gravel pits?
Well, a sifter, the grade the sand or gravel.
Oh, he did. But see, I didn't know that.
And he also, what else did he make? He made something. His sons made gyrocopters. They were flying them around.
Well, he built, when he was in his teens, he built his first airplane. But of course, that's all I heard because he
restored that big pipe organ and built a building
right,
for it.
Okay. But see, when he was born in 1910, and I wasn't born till 24. So see, he was my cousin, but he was 24 years older than me. But I remember they always talked about he built his own plane, but of course he crashed it. I guess that was it. But he did. He went and bought one of the famous organ that was out in this is the picture of my grandma and grandpa Frisch, Amelia and Fred. Amelia and Fred Frisch. This is the house I was raised in. It's on the Frisch homestead. It was built. Well, it was the original house, but it was added to my grandpa added the front part of the house in 1899.
Oh.
This is the picture of Shirley Bauer and myself with my grandchildren and maybe some of my great-grandchildren. This is a picture of my grandpa August Otto. He's my grandfather. From Sandwich. This is Dorothea Otto, my grandmother. Shirley Bauer is my name. This is a picture of my granddaughter Beth Bauer, and paying tribute to her father who passed away when she was 14.